In this video, Michael's going to be going through the best hamstring exercises. Over to Stanley.
So hamstrings. You guys know we've got 4 of them. We're going to concentrate on 3. Why 3? Because it's 3 of them that cross this hip joint. So we've got the semitendinosus, semimembranosus, and biceps femoris that all come from this ischial tuberosity. And what we know is that these muscles come down and either attach onto this section, this section, this section, but you'll see on camera that it's crossing the knee joint. So in this position, where we've got close to full hip extension and then close to full knee flexion, is a fully shortened position for this muscle. And some people can get a little bit closer, but we'll figure out when we get Luke in the picture how far he can go. So we've seen it on Stanley. Let's have a look at it on Luke. What's really interesting is that when you see the width of this, and we just think the hamstrings are on the back of the leg, and what I want to do is just show you this. If you lift this up, I'm grabbing hold of his hamstrings right now. So medial to that, we've got all of his adductors. And lateral to that is actually his quad, his vastus lateralis, because that guy comes all the way around and attaches somewhere in there. So there's an optical illusion in terms of width that we tend to think that this whole thing is his hamstrings, when in reality it's just this. Okay, let's have a look at this exercise first. So it's a version of knee flexion. And I really like this machine. I really like how these are set up. It gives you some flexibility in terms of how much hip joint position you can get into. So right now we're at about 40 degrees, which means there's a certain amount of length in this muscle. Now, as he flexes this knee, if you slowly take that up, his hamstring's getting into a shortened position. Is it his fully shortened position? Nope. We're going to make that happen in a few seconds. So do one more rep for me. So you guys can see how far he's getting in terms of knee flexion. Now what I want to do is I want to train this muscle into its fully shortened position. So the way that I'm going to do that on this machine, if you put your hands onto these pads, so he's now at 0 degrees. Now for you guys at home, if you're training on a prone leg curl, you're probably never going to get to 0 degrees unless you've got a really old machine. There's some out there. Most of them have got some sort of break in the pad that's about 20 degrees, but this is at 0 degrees, which means in terms of his hip position, he's close to full extension. So as he comes up, I want you to see what happens. So slowly take that out for me. So he reaches 90 degrees at the knee. Keep going, keep going. And that's it, he maxes out. So we've not changed the resistance, we've changed the muscle length. So you guys have probably got a seated leg curl. So we need to kind of think if we can tweak your leg curl to make it a little bit better. So let's have a look at a couple of reps first. So I've already set Luke up, he's already in position, and I want you to do a couple of reps for us. Let's have a look at this. So let's have a think about the muscles, let's have a think about the hamstrings. As Luke is straightening his leg, what position is his hip in? Is in at 80 degrees. So those hamstrings are getting into their fully lengthened position. So as he's going back, he's not getting into the absolute shortest position for the hamstrings, but he's getting pretty short. Which means that where is he going to be strongest? He's going to be strongest somewhere in the mid-range, so slowly go down, stop there. He's going to be strongest there, and then from that point on, he gets weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. Now what you'll find, you'll have to go to your particular machine in your particular club or gym and start to have a look at this thing. It's called the cam. And this cam dictates how heavy this exercise is at certain points. So we can see there's a distance here. And can you see these little magnets? I've started to change the distance because the further away, the heavier it is. So the key thing that you guys want to look for is when you get to the shortest position, go around, that thing drops off. And you'll be surprised by how many brands do not. So this is a Cybex Eagle, this does. It doesn't drop off enough for me. So I've actually got these magnetic weights and these things to modify the resistance. But the key thing that I'm looking for is as he goes down, it's heaviest about there and then drops off. So if you're training with a training partner, they can start to offload where your machine is not good enough, as in where it doesn't drop off enough. So you see at this point, even on this machine, it doesn't drop off enough. So I'm just assisting a little bit. This is not my workout. One more rep. But right now, just a little bit. But can you see how that's dropped all the way down? I'm just making you just hang out there for 5 seconds. Here's another question from Tom. One of the things that's really popular out there leg curl, leg extension is to point the feet out or point the feet in this idea that it's going to target different divisions. Now, the only problem with this exercise is that you're locked in. There's only one path of motion that's offered by this axis. So we need to make sure that this knee is aligned to this axis. And if we check this out, when your leg is straight, if you twist your toes out, what happens to his knee? It has to go with it. There's no rotation that's available. Now, if we bend to 90 degrees, he can twist his foot out because there's movement available there. But once he gets to this position, there is no movement at the knee, which means any movement here is coming all the way from the hip. We've looked at 2 exercises which are all about knee motion. And the thing, because this is a 2-joint muscle, the thing that we've been exploring is the position of the hip will vastly dictate the function of this. So in terms of the performance of these guys, because it spans these 2 joints, we need to be thinking about both of them. So the last remaining exercise we're going to look at is a hip extensor challenge. So we could have chosen any version of hip extensor challenge, but we're going to have a look at this one and we're going to look at why it may be effective and why it may not be. So can you grab all of these dumbbells for us? So this is the big Luke Johnson deadlift using dumbbells. So let's have a look at a couple of reps for us. I'm going to get out of the way. And do one more for us. Okay, now what I want you to do is go down and take the dumbbells down to your knee and just hold it there. I'm going to hold it there for a few seconds. So for you guys that are watching that understand these words, we need to figure out how much torque is going through a joint. And we're looking at the hip joint. If we look at the knee, we can see that there's a line of force in this direction and the distance is minimal. So there's not much of a knee flexor or knee extensor challenge. The biggest challenge, and there's a line of force that's coming up here, is to the hip. Now what you can see as you slowly go up, that distance drops off. So what that means in reality is that down at the bottom, go back down for us, the torque is the greatest. This is the biggest challenge. And as he comes up, it drops off, which is not necessarily a bad thing for these guys. But what I want you to see is at this point, these guys are not working because the moment arm is close to 0. And you'll figure out a way to make it so that this is less of a challenge, which is why some people do partials and they keep maintaining tension by not locking out. Okay, the hamstrings have been a big request for us. And so we're looking at this muscle, and what's the key thing? It's a 2-joint muscle. So when a muscle crosses 2 joints, we need to figure out the relationship between these 2 joints. It also means that it's very rare that we're going to figure out one exercise to challenge these guys. And so we've got the prone leg curl, we've got the kneeling leg curl and the different variant hip positions. We've got the seated leg curl and some of those tweaks that we played around with on there. And then we've got these versions of deadlift, which are all looking at hip extension. You could even bring into this a 45-degree bench hip extension. But we just need to think about how can we load this and how can we get the resistance profile dropping off when these guys are getting weaker.
Thank you, Michael.
Pleasure.
If you like the video, hit like. If you've not subscribed, subscribe and comment below. They've got a YouTube channel, but they've not actually posted yet.